Hi everyone, Salena here. Salena Baca Crochet. Of course I hit live and my dog starts going crazy. So Goose says hi everyone. If you're watching live, come on over, say hey, say hello, tell me where you're viewing from. If you're watching on the replay, same great jam. You can just comment like you're here live, and as soon as I see your comment, I'll get right back to you. I hope you do leave comments because I'd love to see who's watching, where you're watching from, and I'd love to hear if you have any questions about Granny Stitch blankets. This is my newest crochet pattern book collection. I have the first stack in my hands. This is not out yet because it is only available for pre-order anywhere books are sold. You can find this. It will be out on the 2nd of September, so just a few short weeks away. I will post the link for you guys to find this in the comments after this video because we're chatting now. You don't need to go anywhere. But I've got quite a few links to share, and I think the one that makes the most sense is a review and just kind of an outline. Well, not a review. A review? Not a review like, did I think it's good, but it's like a review, like an outline, an overview of the book so you can see what it is, why I wrote it, yarn, all that, get a sneak peek of all the patterns, where to get it, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to start you off with that, but you can also find this entire collection, all of the patterns on Ravelry. I'm going to post that as well. And that way, if you want to see the individual patterns, because this is kind of a sneaky peek, right? You can see, but you can't really see. That way, if you want to see all the individual designs, you can do that on Ravelry. All of the individual patterns are available on Ravelry. They are not exclusive to this book. So if you want a tangible collection, this is a really inexpensive option to do that. And if you want patterns in your Ravelry library, you can do that too, okay? Why I love posting all of my patterns on Ravelry is that you can get all of the individual details. And so if you want to see exactly what yarn I used, how much yarn, all the sizes, the dimensions, the stitches, the specialty stitches, the techniques, I list all of that. So that's really helpful information. In addition to that, you can post your finished projects to Ravelry. So it's a great way for you to kind of catalog your own crochet resume, see what you've been doing and where it is in case you want to do it again. But as a person who wants to follow instructions, if you're like, do I follow these instructions? This is the pattern I get. I love when people post their finished projects to a pattern. And that way you can see all the different renditions, all the different projects from a particular pattern that others have made up. So lots of great information there, lots of totally different ways you can see patterns so that you can really see if you dig it, right? Okay, so I have not done a live video in so long. So if you are here watching, come on over, say hey, say hello, give you a shout out. Like Roseanne is here, hello, and Lori is here watching. Thanks for viewing. Okay, so Granny Stitch blankets. I finished this collection forever ago, but in the publishing world, it takes forever to put something like this together. So these are all blankets that I made like so long ago. Turned all this into my publisher like last year. I'm not even kidding you. Like so long ago. But the reason I put this together, even though I made it so long ago, is that I really wanted to put a collection of crochet blanket patterns that could really withstand the test of time. Whenever you pick this up, whether it be today or it be years from now, I really wanted you to be able to look at these blankets, these styles, these fabrics, these colors, and not feel like, ooh, that feels so much like 2025. that looks like something my grandma made. I really wanted you to look at all of these and feel inspired, feel motivated. So many crocheters, we're going to be out here making blankets. And so it's really nice to have a collection of blankets that you can kind of go back to again and again. So as a person who makes a lot of blankets, I've made a lot of blankets in my lifetime. As a person who loves granny squares, I really wanted to kind of pull those two together and do something different. Now, tell me in the comments, again, whether you're here live or on the replay, like Pauline is here. Hey, good to see you. How many of you, when you learn to crochet with a granny square? Raise your hand, but tell me in the comments. Yes. Okay, me too. But not only maybe did you learn to crochet by making a granny square, but potentially one of the very first things you learned to make was a granny square. Again, me. right? Because I learned with granny squares. So because a granny square was the first thing that I learned to make, I was like, oh, you can just keep going and make a blanket? And then, you know, that's just kind of what everybody did. Everybody was just making blankets, but with giant granny squares. Or maybe you make smaller granny squares and you seam all those together and then it's just one giant granny blanket of a bunch of squares, right? So we just kind of did that forever and always. And I love classic granny squares. But I like to do things differently. I like to be new and different and interesting sometimes. Hey, Giovanna, good to see you. I'm so glad you're checking in. Thanks for being here. So yeah, so I'm not trying to say like we're done with the granny square because I am not. Some people are tired of the granny square. Let me know in the comments. Are you like, I'm so over it. So over the granny square. Or it's overrated. It's iconic. It's a classic. It's something that I feel like there's some ebb and flow. Right? So it's like we see a ton of granny squares and they go away for a while, and then we see them again, they go away for a while. For one, I've never been tired of granny squares and I keep doing different things with them. So I really wanted to take blankets, which is something that I love, and granny squares, which is something else that I love. And I wanted to bring those two together and just put together 10 what I hope will be classic granny square, granny stitch blankets. Because notice, I did say granny stitch blankets because there's a difference between a granny square. There is a classic motif that is a granny square. Just because something is square does not mean it's a granny square, because we can do lots of different things with motifs. So I was very careful about that verbiage. But I really wanted to take everything that we love about the classic granny square, which in my opinion, I love that you know where it's going. Right? So whenever we learned crochet by sight, which was me, I think a lot of times the reason we just use a granny square as an example to teach beginners is because it's like, well, this is what it's supposed to look like. So you can see where I'm going. So just do what I'm doing. And then you just keep doing that thing and it gets bigger. So like, it's a very easy to replicate. You can look at it by sight and you can kind of keep going. It doesn't consume you. But it also creates really beautiful fabric. Like there is a stitch motif going on. There is a pattern going on that is really fun to do, really beautiful to look at. So, I mean, in contrast, you could just make a blanket out of double crochet going back and forth. But like that can get real boring. But the granny square, even though you're still using a double crochet stitch and some, you know, and some chains, you know, and some other things, you know, I'm not just saying it's basic. But there's something going on there that makes it look a little bit more exquisite, right? Okay. It looks like Alicia is here. Alicia's watching my channel over here. How you doing? Good to see you. Joanne Green is here. So good to see you. Roseanne is here. Alicia is agreeing, says, yeah, agrees with me. Alicia says, love a good granny square. I get lost in the repetition. Yes. And I'm so glad that you said that because that's exactly what I'm saying here. Whenever I make a pattern, something that I love to do is have an interesting stitch pattern, an interesting fabric, but something you can get lost in the repetition of. I don't want crochet to like completely rule my life whenever I'm crocheting. I really want crochet to be something I can do in my life. So I can still participate in life and I'm making something too. So granny stitch blankets. What I'm doing here is not going to do this book justice. So definitely click on the link in the comments after this so you can just really do a deep dive into this book to see more. I actually hate that phrase. I'm making fun of myself right now. A deep dive. Yeah, laugh with me. We can. Okay. All right. So there are 10 patterns in this book. I do use some classic granny squares, but I do so in hopefully what you think is like a twisty, unexpected, new, different way. Because I didn't want this to not include a granny square, but I really wanted to take a granny square and really go way beyond just, and then keep going until it's done, right? I really wanted to do something different. But there's so many nods to the granny square here that are completely different than a granny square, but use some of that stitch work that has that like classic granny pattern, that repetition that we love, so many things like that, okay? So what we've got here is, first we've got a hexagon blanket. So it's that granny stitch that we like, right? So it's that cluster of three, you know, the double crochets that we like. but it's made into a hexagon. And how these are joined is that they're joined with a contrasting border. So these are all hexagons, and then there are just two half hexagons, so that you have two nice straight edges, and then you do have these, you know, the points on two sides too. So I want you guys to know, I posted a video on this page earlier today just to show how big these blankets are, because they're not so big that you guys are like, oh my gosh, they're going to take forever. That's why I hate making blankets. But they are throw size. Like you can put a person under them, you know, under, like if you're on the couch, or if you want it to go on the back of your couch, or if you want it to be on the edge of your bed, or if it's for like, you know, a toddler, their bed or a crib or something like that. I think a throw is really the perfect size, but really these pictures do not show the scale. So definitely check out the video that I posted on, the Lazy Days throw that I made, because really it's going to show you like, oh, this is like a proper blanket. Okay. Like, I don't feel like it's so big that I can't do it, but I don't feel like it's not big enough. Like it's not gonna like, you know, fill my appetite, you know? Okay. So granny hexies. And then here's something that I super love. This was so much fun to make. So this is 4 different motifs. I did stripe them. It does use the granny stitch. These are worked corner to corner. These are 4 individual pieces. And because of the striping, whenever you put them together, do you see the optical illusion that they kind of make? It looks like an X. So fun. So fun. Okay, so here's a corner to corner granny throw. But what I did with this is I held 2 strands of yarn together. So that did a few things for me. One, it created a custom color combination. So you can hold 2 strands together. You can hold a solid and a variegated, or, you know, a tweed and a solid, a self-striping. You can do so many different things, right? So I held 2 strands of yarn together to create that custom color, custom texture, but it also created a thicker fabric. So it was really nice to double up on the yarn and create something thicker and heavier without using like a thick or bulky yarn. So super satisfying, super. Okay, so this does use classic granny squares, but it also uses granny triangles. And then I did use 3 different colors to create this really nice gradient so that you can really see where these motifs come together, but in a way that really creates this beautiful, you know, motif, right? So it is just one big square when you're done, but it's comprised of all these different parts. And because of the gradient colors, it really just makes the whole thing pop. Okay, so this one right here, these are all granny rectangles. So there are 3 granny rectangles. I did make them in 3 different colors. And the reason I chose these colors is that it was really kind of like a nod to like probably the 60s. Just because I feel like there was a time in my perception, there was a time kind of like in the, you know, 60s and 70s where everyone had a crochet crochet blanket on the back of their couch. And these colors just kind of remind me of like the 60s and 70s. So something that I feel like I've seen time and time again. But these rectangles here are really just, I mean, it's really just an elongated granny square, but the foundation is not like a long chain. So I really feel like I came up with a very clever and flexible and fun foundation for this that I hope you guys really love. And it isn't a long chain. So you're not going to have that ugly, you know, chain that, you know, kind of pulls and cinches in the middle that's impossible to work into. So definitely, you know, take a sneak peek on that, all right? I also finished this on each end. I finished it with some fringe because I love fringe, but I really love double knot fringe because for people who are afraid of fringe, I feel like there's a few hesitations they have, but the only hesitation I'm gonna discuss right now is whenever you put fringe on something, sometimes people are like, then, you know, it's going to be tricky in the washer, right? Or the dryer. So double knot fringe is going to be thick enough. And with the double knot, you know, don't just throw it in there with some towels or something, but I mean, you know, it should be easier on, you know, it should have less wear and tear, and it should really hold in place, particularly with the yarn that I used. So that's going to be less like coming apart, knotting up, things like that. So, and it's really just a really beautiful way to add fringe is the double knot. Okay, this right here also uses some classic granny squares. This is another project where I used 2 strands of yarn together to create a really beautiful custom color. I wanted this to be more jewel tone, and I feel like it was, but then when I put it together, it looked more like old Americana, because everyone that saw this was like, that looks like an old flag, right? It looks like an old Americana flag, which wasn't my intention. It was supposed to be so much more like vibrant, and again, like I said, jewel tone, but the strand of yarn that I held it together with really muted it and made it look a little more like, you know, a little more old-fashioned-y. But actually I really loved it, you know? Do you know? So this is some granny squares put together, but then there is granny stitch fabric on either side. So it really is this kind of like off center, which I love. I love when things are balanced, but I also love when they're off center. So this creates this off-centered look to where you do have this granny stitch fabric on this side and this side, but then you've got these gradient granny squares here, and then the whole thing has a border in a different color. So it really does tie together multiple colors in different ways. So you can really see that there are different things going on here. It's one piece of fabric, but it's one piece of fabric that's patchwork together. So I think that by making each one of these colors different, it really highlights that. So I loved it. All right, guys, if you are in my group, you guys are going to need to check this out, because I've decided that I'm going to be selling some of these finished samples. There's only one of each, and this is the first one that I posted. It is in my Etsy shop, and so I put a special super awesome bonus in the listing. So if you are the person who purchases this finished sample, this one of a kind that is in my book, there are some bonuses I'm throwing in. So definitely check that out in my Etsy shop or in my group. Check that out. Let me know if you have any questions. So this one looks like a classic granny square. It is the same length as it is height. So it is a perfect square. It does end in the double knot fringe here and here. However, it is 2 half squares, and then they are seamed together. And I call this granny square reflections, because one is just kind of a reflection of the other, really showing that these are 2 pieces of fabric that are seamed together. And I made these colors completely different to really highlight that it isn't like, it is one square, but it's one square that is components that are put together. So that was a lot of fun. I really liked that. Okay, now let's move on down. This one was probably the most fun to make. Yeah, it's a bold statement, but yeah, I'm gonna stand by that. This one was the most fun to make. I used a really thick and quick yarn. So each one of this circle is made up of all of these different triangle pieces, and each one of these triangle pieces was made with a really bulky, thick yarn. So it worked up so quick, like insanely fast. And then I put a contrasting color around each one of them, so you could really see that they all look like these individual pie pieces. And it was so easy to seam together, really fun. I love that each one of these triangles was designed to be flat and even, so they're not going to be curling up or rippling or anything like that. They do use that, so it's a granny triangle. And I absolutely love how huge this is. Again, you guys have got to check these out in the Ravelry shop and just some of the other finished projects, just to see the scale of these things. I'm slowly going to be adding videos on my page here, but definitely check that out. Okay, so this is the one I posted a video of earlier today. My photographer for this collection loved it so much that she was like, I have to have that. So my photographer does have this, and she loves it, and she uses it every day. I saw it in her house. It's so cute. This was another one that I really, really enjoyed making. I'd make any one of these again and again. But I feel like if you were just to ask me which one I would make like right now, it would be this one. So this looks like one big granny square, right? And it is, but it is 4 granny triangles. They start in one color and then they end in another. And then those 2 colors, whenever they're brought together, you know, makes that big X pattern. I really loved the border on this. I thought the border was just such a It's not a scallop, it's not a shell, but it definitely is a very simplistic stitch pattern that does give this beautiful lacy shell look. Little fan, if you will. This was made with very bulky, very thick, very heavy yarn. I forget the weight, the actual weight. It is in the Ravelry listing. This thing weighs a ton. This is like one of those coma-inducing blankets. It is so heavy, but just like in such a delicious way. All right, and last but not least is the pattern that I think you guys like the most. I wasn't sure if anyone would like this because it is a theme that I have seen my entire life. I've seen this in my grandmother's house. I've seen this in other people's houses. I've seen these just in so many different places. So it's a mile a minute theme, right? So the mile a minute themes are lots of long strips that are then joined together. And so this is kind of another one of those nods to crochet past, right? So I love the idea of a mile a minute for a few reasons. I'll tell you about some in just a second because, you know, that's another theme that I used here. But I used each one of these. I made a granny chevron. So, and I also, in each one of these, I used 2 strands of yarn held together to make a custom color. I love doing that here, making all these custom colors. And each one of these is a granny chevron that are then joined together. And then I just did one giant tassel on the ends just for that. Because I like tassels, right? I mean, it's a beautiful blanket. You're going to be displaying it, so you need some tassels on that, right? So anyway, that's my logic. Okay, so that's all 10 patterns. That's all 10 patterns in this book. That's a little bit on each one, but some things that I think you'll love about this book is, one, they're all throw size. So you could use smaller yarn and make a smaller blanket. You could use bigger yarn and make a bigger blanket. Some of these you could just kind of make larger and make a larger blanket. So to speak, even though the instructions don't say how to exactly, but you could make each one of these motifs a few rows or rounds larger. Same with, I mean, with any one of these, you could just kind of take the components and make them a little larger or smaller if you want. So they're adaptable in size. You don't need to be a mathematician or a rocket scientist to figure it out. So another thing that I really like about this is that, most of these are made in individual pieces. I mean, this, you've got a larger piece that you're working into, and this, you've got just one solid piece. But I really wanted to make sure that most of these were made in individual pieces that were then seamed together. And the reason that was so important to me is that people get bored with blankets. They're like, you know, it's fun when you start, but then, you know, when you have 200 rows and you're on row 120, you're like, this will never end. It's going in the corner. I hate this. So I didn't want people to have that feeling of working on something and just kind of being stuck literally under the weight of it and just feeling like you're bored with it. So I wanted to eliminate that by creating all these little pieces that you could work on anywhere, you could take with you on the go, and you don't feel bored. So hopefully you guys dig that too. I used, for all of the patterns in this book, as you can see by the logo right here, I only used Lion Brand yarns for this book. All of the patterns in this book are only Lion Brand yarn. Even when I held 2 strands of yarn together, it was all Lion Brand yarn. So the reason I did that is that I can find Lion Brand yarn locally in a couple different places. You can also easily find it online in so many different places. And it's also a very affordable yarn. And that's super important whenever you need a lot of yarn to make a blanket. So I really wanted to make sure that all of the yarns that I chose for this were going to be affordable options, but also things that you could probably easily find. I mean, I work and live in America, and so whenever I'm grabbing for yarn, I try to think of others who are like me, and so I design for me, but you know, that's kind of what I'm sharing here. So if you want to substitute any of the yarns, if you want to just use something in your stash, or if you want to find something different, hopefully all of the yarns that I chose are going to be adaptable for you. So what I mean by that is maybe I've chosen a yarn that has a wool blend and you're like, absolutely not. Goose agrees. Absolutely not. I'm not using wool. I want to use something else. You can just check out the weight of the yarn and you can check out the overall yardage that I used. And you can find something similar. So I think the same is going to be true for so many of these. Also, I mean, size matters because you want to make roughly the size in here, or maybe you want to intentionally make a little bigger, a little smaller. I really want you to feel like you can play around with the yarn stash that you already have or yarns that you love using. And if you want to do like a double strand, if you want to do one of these things, hopefully you're going to feel like you can play around with that and you know exactly what kind of results you're going for, you know, the size and result and all that jazz. So I really loved making this book. I was just talking to my publisher about this and I said, I think this might be one of my favorite books that I've ever made. And that feels true. I know that I probably say that for every new book. I'm like, this is my new favorite. This is my new favorite. But what I love about this is that it feels very timeless and it is something that I've always made. I've always made blankets. I love the granny square, but I also like playing with the idea of the granny square. So this is definitely something where I'm going to make all of these time and time again. I loved making each one of them. This was such a joy to put together. It was just so fun and beautiful to look at. And I hope you guys feel the same. All right, I've talked long enough. Let's see who else is here and what kind of questions you guys have. Alicia, so good to see you. Giovanna, good to see you. Rachel Weiss, so glad you didn't miss it either. Roseanne is here. Joanne Green says hello to everyone. Alicia says, I'm doing great. Happy to be here and see ya. Always such a pleasure to see you, Alicia. It's been a minute, but I see what you're doing. I'm still here following you, so it's good to see you. Luz is here. Hi, greetings from Puerto Rico. Hope you are all fine. Joanne Green says, I will never be tired of anything made with granny squares. I absolutely agree. I love the granny square, but if you guys, have seen any of my work, you'll see that I not only have done so many things with actual granny squares, but I've also really played with the stitch to make new and different things. So this is just a theme that I never tire of. It's probably one of my biggest inspirations. Oh, who else? Julie Osborne is here. Joanne Green says, awesome variation of granny stitches in your new book. The hexagon is so cool. Luz says, which yarn you suggest? Cotton. So I don't think I used cotton for any of these. I think I mostly used acrylic. I used wool. I used acrylic blends. I will use cotton for blankets, but mainly I like to use a cotton blend. And then really size is going to matter for me because cotton can be heavier. And so if I'm making a really tiny baby blanket, like 30 inches or smaller, I'd probably use a cotton blend. But no, I don't think any of these are going to be made with cotton. So depending on the look and the feel and the function that I want for a blanket, I want something that's going to be durable. I want something that's going to be sturdy. I want something that's going to have some heft to it. It's going to be thrown around. I've got a dog. I've got kids. I've got grandkids. I, want it to have easy care instructions. So whenever I'm choosing materials, I think about all of those different things. But you can see all of the yarns that I use in this collection whenever you view this title on Ravelry. And you can view them all. And if you want to substitute, again, if you're making a blanket for you, if you're making something that is going to fit your style and taste, you can do that fits your style and taste. Absolutely. Let's see who else is here. Roseanne says, also nice and different. I'm glad you think so. Joanne says, all of these blankets would be great for a baby blanket, have baby acrylic yarn in weight 1. Which of these blankets would work up best with the baby yarn? So that's interesting that you mentioned that. So if you were only using a weight 1 yarn for any one of these and you were following the instructions exactly, they would turn out tiny. So, it would depend on your stitch tension and your fabric tension, like how much smaller it would be, but it would definitely be smaller. But like, for example, this is 52 by 52, and I think it was made in like a weight 5 or a 6 yarn. And it made a 52 by 52. If you used a weight 1 yarn for this and you made no variations in the instructions, would it be 18 or 20 inches? Maybe that's what you're going for. Maybe you want something super small. So whenever I have this conversation about weight and size and changing yarn, if Linda Woodthorpe's here, Linda, say hey. But Linda's always the one where I'm like, guys, if you took this and you just made it in a thread, it could be that, right? So for example, if you use the weight yarn that I used, I think I use a 5 in this, right? And it's, I don't know, 60 inches by 40. Don't quote me on that. But if I said something like, but if you use thread and you just use one of these, it would be so small that it would be a bookmark. And Linda will be like, I love that idea. I'm doing that. So, you know, could you use a different yarn? Yes. Will it be a different size? Yes. How different do you want that size to be? That is completely up to you. If you wanted to turn any one of these into a shrinked up version that is a baby blanket, you could use a weight 1. This will be much smaller. It might even be like a placemat size. So it'd be like a doll blanket. Or maybe you take that weight 1 yarn, you pair it with a weight 4 yarn, and then it'll give you a little bit more bulk and heft and maybe be closer to that smaller baby size that you're looking for. So lots of room to be playful like that. Who else is here? Linda Woodthorpe. I was just talking about you. I hope you heard all those lovely things. Linda said, I loved helping to test most of these. Thank you. I always appreciate you and you're always in my mind. Luz says, fortunately, one can get Lion Brand at Walmart. Yes, and that's why I love working with brands like Lion Brand, is that, you know, when I look for yarn locally and all the places where I can find yarn, I find this yarn. So no one has Joann's anymore, unfortunately. We're all sad that she went away. But, you know, Lion Brand was there when I wrote this book. Lion Brand is also at Michael's, which we all still have, know, and love. And Walmart and, you know, other kinds of local craft stores, you're probably going to find that. And again, in terms of online, I mean, you can get Lion Brand yarn directly from lionbrandyarn.com, but you can also get it in so many other places. So that's why I love using them. Laura says, hi, I'm new here, but I've been a huge fan of yours for years. Well, thank you for checking in. Linda said, I made some of my test projects with Hobby Rainbow 8/4 and 3mm hook. Some were about 18 inches across. Were those for these particular patterns? If you did that for any of the patterns in this book, or for any of my pattern testers who are watching, if you tested any of these, I would love it if you link your project down below. Just so we can, you know, give you a special little shout out and see your own individual work. But again, when you find this collection on Ravelry, any project that you click on, you can see all of the finished projects that have been attached. So you can see all of the pattern testers and the project makers that have worked on this so far. All right, guys, I just wanted to make sure you knew that I made a new book and make sure you knew that it's coming soon. I'm going to post a link in the comments so you guys can see my little write-up on this book. I also have a giveaway. So depending on when you're watching this, maybe you can click on over and participate in that giveaway. And I'm also going to be selling some of the samples in this. I only have one of each. So if you're interested, I'm going to be sharing those details in my group. I've just posted one so far, and there are definitely a ton of bonuses that go with that purchase. So check on that. Let me know if you have any questions. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. It is always a pleasure. Let me know what questions you have. I cannot wait to see. Peace, love, crochet. See you next time.